Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. The biggest podcasting mistakes that kill business growth. This is a topic that I've been asked to talk about in this episode of Podcast Done For You, the show. So let's get cracky. You've embarked on the path, or you're about to embark on the path of a podcast for your business, but you don't want it to negatively impact your business. So here are some big ideas that are really simple to help you overcome it. So one of the biggest things that people forget about is the podcast actually reflects you and your brand. Sounds simple, but it's not just about whacking your logo up and having a pretty picture in the graphic. It's actually about the podcast itself and what it says about you. Now, simple things like the way you dress, your background, all of those kinds of things are reflective of your brand. Now, what you don't want to do is set up something that is artificial to how you would greet a person normally. It's why I'm not a big fan of virtual backgrounds, and we've talked about that before, because the problem with a virtual background ultimately is that you don't let people see the real you. And if they were to come into your office and meet with you, then are they going to see a virtual background? The answer is no. So why not show them what they would see anyway, where you want to meet them? That's where you should set your podcast. It's why I'm not a massive fan of going to studios. The problem with a studio is that it's a very forced environment. It's not an environment where you're going to naturally meet clients. So you're putting on a show. It's not a show. It's a conversation with your audience. It's a conversation with people that should be saying yes to you in the future about whatever business you're doing. So don't make that mistake of not letting your podcast reflect your brand. Because here's the thing, if you set unreasonable expectations, then you're setting people up to be disappointed when they actually meet you. So that's number one. Number two is when you are setting up your podcast, you need to deliver it in a way that is consistent with your brand. So we've talked about some of those things not to do in terms of the overall look and feel of it, but also it is the way that you have the conversation. The conversation itself should be reflective of how you would have a conversation with someone were they to walk in through your door right now and you to chat to them about whatever business it is that you are doing. And that also then extends to the quality. Now, one of the things that many podcasters make the mistake of is going cheap on the quality. Now, we've recorded episodes in the past about choosing things like a microphone. It's a really important thing to do because when people hear this kind of crappy sound that comes out of headsets, and I'm also talking about, whether it be your wireless earbuds or even your wired in ones, all of those things are never going to give you a great, really feel for your voice and how you should be presenting yourself. You want to be professional in how you sound. It is really important because people are going to be listening to you. Sounds obvious, but people forget about it. Getting that studio quality sound is something you can do a little bit of in post-production, but choose the right microphone to get it right. Again, this is what you want people listening to you. Make it as easy and as comfortable and as professional as possible when you're doing that. Some of the other things that really hinder growth is consistency. Now, it's like anything in business. If you start it, then you want to keep going with it, unless there is a really good reason to stop and you make it known to people. One of the biggest frustrations that I've seen over the years with websites, is a good example, is how many times do you go and look at a website and the blog is there, but nothing's been touched for years sometimes, certainly months in the majority of cases. Don't start something you can't continue with, because that inactivity is worse than not having the activity at all. And I think that's the same with a podcast. You build some momentum, you want to continue with that. Don't let gaps between the shows. Make sure that if you are going to take a gap, that it's really well announced. We're taking a break for the end of the season.
we'll be back in 3 weeks' time, whatever that is. You might be going on holidays. It might be the end of the year. There are good reasons to take a little bit of a break, and you might play a best of during that time, but you want the consistency, or the audience forgets about you and moves to something else to fill that space. And then when that space is filled, they won't come back. So you have to be consistent, and that extends to how you talk to people about your podcast. Make sure that you're posting on a regular basis across all social media platforms, on your website, in your newsletters, and the many other ways that you can use your podcast. It is very much about being consistent. But here's the big thing and the big revelation for you. Make sure that the objective of your podcast is always being achieved. One of the biggest things that I see happening with podcasters is they forget that they are the expert. Now, it can go the other way, where they bring on a guest and they forget that the guest is also an expert, and then make the guest feel quite uncomfortable because they haven't allowed them to speak enough. Now, we've spoken before about the value of having a co-host on the show, and I'm a massive advocate for that. And you can check out the other episode relating to that. But you can also contact me anytime and we'll have a chat about that independently. But the main reason for doing that is that ultimately the co-host is there to make you the expert, to make sure even if you bring on a guest, it's coming back to you as the expert. The main reason you are having the podcast is to build your credibility, for you to be seen as the authority. Now, you don't want to do it, as I said before, at the expense of a guest, but you also don't want to sacrifice yourself for the guest. That balance is struck by having a co-host who maneuvers that space for you. And much like when you go to a conference and there's a panel, there's someone that is leading that discussion to invite the experts in for further conversation. And that's what a co-host will bring to the table for you. It's not something that you do with a partner. You can bring a partner into your show, but by all means, still have a co-host who's acting independently. Just take a look at some of the best radio shows going around where there's always someone playing that role. Now, if you want some other tips around what is going to hinder your podcast from growing, I can tell you that the answer is really simple. Make sure that the topics that you're talking to are topics that your audience is interested in, not just topics that you think they should be interested in. Don't make the mistake of jumping into the latest and greatest and news headlines, or even just what you think is trending, because it may not be what your audience is interested in. Remember, you're the expert and you've got a particular leaning and wanting to learn more about the area that you're in, but your audience is wanting to come to you as the expert. They're not necessarily wanting you to deliver the how-tos. In fact, I would argue they're never wanting that. They want to know that you know how to deal with it. They want you to give them some insights, some shifts in mindset. They don't want this to be an instructional thing, which leads me into the other big tip. Don't make it a webinar. Now, I have done a masterclass in a previous episode of the podcast, and I very deliberately made it known that it is a masterclass. But when I recorded that masterclass, and I had in mind very much that it was going to be an episode of the podcast, I made it very well known to people during the whole recording of it that it was also for people to just listen to. They may not be watching it live, and they may not even watch the video. They may just simply listen to it as part of a podcast. So you do have to think of that if you are going to do something like that. But again, a masterclass is usually quite different to a webinar. I don't encourage the webinars being turned into a podcast. They are two different things, serve two very different purposes. Don't try and make one thing into the other, because usually you are isolating an audience who are thinking, I've come here for this and I'm getting that. And it works on both sides of the fence. Don't create a podcast and think that it can just be used as a webinar. It can't. It's not the same thing. And keep that in mind whenever you're doing it. So there's some really valuable tips. I hope that you've learned from that as to what is really hindering a business podcast from growing. It is a really simple medium to use if you get it right and if you are prepared to come to the right people to help you out. Remember, that is probably the other bonus tip that I can give you. Don't try and do this all on your own. It's not because you can't, it's because you shouldn't. It's because you are there to be the expert in whatever it is you're the expert in. You do not need yourself and your own business resources being channeled into churning out a podcast. That is something that should be left to the experts. It's why we're here at Podcast Done For You. Check it out, podcastdoneforyou.online for all the information, of course, in the show notes. We'd love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think is considering having a podcast. And I hope those tips have been valuable. Keep the topics coming in suggestions to me as to what you'd like us to cover in future episodes of the Podcast Done For You show. Until next time, look forward to your company then.